Today I'm going to talk about currencies and deadlines on MyFlightbook, and in particular I'm going to talk about how you can create your own custom currencies and deadlines. And so you're probably already aware that MyFlightbook can track your flying currency for you. And this largely breaks down into two buckets. There are currencies which are based on your flying experience. So the classic example here is 6157A, where you have to have 3 takeoffs and landings within the preceding 90 days in order to carry passengers. And the key thing about a currency is that it's looking backwards from today to see if you have the required experience within the required preceding amount of time. And then I can compute an expiration date based on how far back I had to go to find that experience. The other kind of currency are what I call deadlines, which are just that. They're based on the passage of time, the calendar date, things like your medical or your flight review. Now, MyFlightbook has support for a wide variety of built-in currencies and deadlines, mostly based on regulatory rules. But often you have an employer or an FBO or a flying club who imposes additional restrictions beyond that and that you want to be able to track. So I'll show you how you can create this. You have to use the website for this, but if you create a new currency rule or deadline rule, it will show up on the iOS or Android apps. So you want to go to the Profile tab and go to Preferences under it. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see two sections here, Custom Deadlines and Custom Currency Rules. So I'm going to start here with Custom Currency Rules. There's an FBO near me where I got my multi-engine rating in a Seneca. And you could imagine they have a rule that says that if you want to rent the Seneca, you have to have flown it at least once within the preceding 90 days. Otherwise, you have to go get checked out. So I'm going to click to show to create a new rule. I'm going to give a name for this rule of 90-day Seneca. And I'm going to say I have to perform at least one flight within the preceding 90 days. Now I just covered a lot there, so let me go through these one at a time. You can say a minimum number of events or even a maximum number of events. You could imagine a company imposing restriction on the number of hours you can fly in the past week. You say how many of the events, and so the events can be discrete, like flights, or it can be continuous, like how many hours of PIC time did you have. And there's a whole list of different things that you can choose from here. And if what you need isn't in the list, just give me a buzz. It's not that hard to add new ones. Then you say how many time period, but you can also choose days, calendar months. Now this uses the FAA notion of calendar months. So if it's March 3rd and you say 2 calendar months, that doesn't go back to January 3rd, that goes back to January 1st. And then there's a whole bunch of these time periods that are actually fixed, so they don't shift based on today. So 6 months aligned January, July would be January 1st to January 1st to June 30th, July 1st to December 31st. I've seen these mostly in the military, so you probably don't need that, but you can do 3-month periods, 4-month periods, 6-month periods, or 12-month periods. So in the military, often it's got to be aligned with your birth month, for example. And so that's the basics for the rule for the kind of flight experience that you're looking for. But you then need to further restrict it to only count certain kinds of flying. So I can say whether it can be in any particular model. So for example, I could say it has to be in a Seneca, but you could imagine that the FBO actually doesn't want it in any Seneca. They want it in their Seneca. So I can also restrict on particular aircraft. So yeah, I have November 1078 uniform in this list, and it's a Seneca, but that's not the one they want. Their Seneca is November 1629 or 2. So that's the one I'm going to select. Now I should point out in both of these lists, you can do multiple selection by holding down the Shift key or the Option key or the Command key, depending on whether you're Mac or Windows or or Safari or Firefox or Chrome, but you can select multiple items here if you want, if any of those items will match. You can also restrict based on category, so airplane, glider, rotorcraft, or on category class, single engine C, helicopter, things like that. So I don't need to restrict on that because restricting on the Piper Seneca kind of means I'm restricting on airplane multi-engine LAN. So I'm going to add the currency rule here. You can see here it is 90-day Seneca. I can click the red X to delete it, and I can click edit to update it if I want to. And if I switch back over to my currency and I refresh, here it is, 90-day Seneca, and you can see current until August 12th, 2018. Now, how did I get August 12th? Well, if I scroll down, here's the last Seneca flight I can see, and that is on May 14th. 90 days from May 14th is August 12th. So the idea is on August 12th, I can go back 90 days and I'll still find that flight, but on August 13th, I won't. And if you want to see how that's computed, you'll notice it is hyperlinked. So if I click on the hyperlink, here it's showing me my totals with the query of between April 8th and July 8th, which is today, the day I'm recording this, in November 16292. And there's the flight. So we can see that I've met the requirements for that custom currency rule. So let me go back here and switch over to show. That's custom currency rules in a nutshell. Custom deadlines are similar, but again, because they're not based on your flying, they're based on the passage of time. They're a little bit different. And the neat thing about deadlines is you can tie them to aircraft. So I've actually already got two deadlines in the system here that are tied to one of our club aircraft. And I'll talk about these in a minute. But let me show how you create a deadline. So first you click here and you give it a name. So maybe I need to have my identification verified, or I need to renew my my identification by the end of the year. So I could say simply renew identification, no associated aircraft. Since this is going to be the end of the year, I can do December 31st. And maybe that is, I have to do that every 12 calendar months. So every year I have to update my identification. So I can add that deadline. Here we go. So renew identification, due December 31st, 2018. When it's done, I'm going to reset for 12 calendar months after the completion date. So if I were to renew my identification today, I could go edit. New expiration is 12 months from, well, I could do it at the end of the year, but maybe it's now going to be 12 months from today. And actually, today's the 7th, not the 8th. And so if I update, we'll see that to be the end of next July, July 31st, 2019. So it knows that now that I've done it, I've got another 12 months to go. Now, one of the things I was able to do in here is when I create a deadline, I can associate it with an aircraft. And so if I have an airworthiness directive to do, or other things that are specific to that aircraft, I can select the aircraft, and then I can either have it due by date. So maybe the airworthiness directive is that every 12 months you have to do a certain inspection. And so it works basically the same way here. You give the deadline date, and you optionally say whether you should extend it. Or you can do it based on aircraft hours. And I'm deliberately vague here on whether hours are TAC or Hobbs. You keep track of that, that's fine. But you can do it based on hours, and then you'll see the deadline is due at a particular hour, and then you'll extend it by a certain number of hours. And so you can see, for example, I have two such deadlines for this aircraft. So we've upgraded it to have a glass cockpit. It's got the GTN 750 in it and G500. And so now I have to update the database every 28 days when there's a new cycle. And so the next cycle is going to be out on the 18th. And if I were to update that on the 18th, then click update, it would compute 28 days from then and set a new deadline based on that. Likewise, we've refurbished the engine and got a new propeller, and we have to grease it every 100 hours. So that's hours of flight time. That's not calendar driven, obviously, because it depends on how much the plane is flown. And so that is based on hours, and I can update that, and it'll add when I go to update that, because I said it's due every 100 hours. It's going to be new expiration is 100 hours from whenever I do the greasing. And so if I go over to my currency and update again, we can see where those deadlines are. And so update the database. And again, this is hyperlinked to the aircraft because I can update things like maintenance in the aircraft or to the preferences. You can see I can grease the prop. So update the database is in blue because that's coming due within about 2 weeks. Greasing the prop is in black. I can't tell how close you are to needing to do that. It all depends on how much the airplane is flying, and that can't be predicted reliably. And here's the other deadline I created to renew the identification. Now, one of the cool things about these aircraft-related deadlines is that if you go into your aircraft list and then go to the aircraft to which they're associated, they will show up here as well. So along with your other maintenance that you can see for the aircraft, you can see your deadlines and you can edit them all in one place. So that's a really useful way to keep track of company imposed or FBO imposed currency rules or airworthiness directives or other aircraft or company or FBO imposed deadlines. I hope that's helpful. Please let me know if there's anything that you need in custom currencies or custom deadlines.